Heather. I'm with Friends of Pleasant Hill Creeks. We're an all-volunteer group of residents of Pleasant Hill, and we are out here with the Watershed Project and members of the community to do some studies on the health of our creek. So we are collecting bugs, which tell us a lot about the health of our creek, because certain bugs can only live in creeks that have good, clean water. So this is teaching us about where our creeks are healthy and where they might be in trouble, and so we can focus our efforts on restoring our creeks and improving water quality. While we're out here, we're also seeing fish, crawdads, birds, dragonflies and butterflies, so we know there's life in our creek. On previous projects, we've seen river otters and muskrats, and we're right here in Pleasant Hill, which is a community in central Contra Costa County, and the name of our creek is Grayson Creek, and we're part of the Walnut Creek Watershed.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm with the Watershed Project. Today we are at Pleasant Hill at Grayson Creek. We're doing some surveying with a few volunteers, and we are collecting macroinvertebrates, and we're using them as indicator species to check the water quality. They can kind of help us judge the general water quality of the area. And we had a few other volunteers that were helping us get the depths of different sections of the creek, so we had transects set out, and we do this at a few different creeks in the area, and we'll be doing more in the East Bay with the same protocol, same transects and everything like that. So yeah, we spent the afternoon doing that, and we'll send out the insects, the bugs, the macroinvertebrates to a lab, and then we'll see what comes back. We're not able to ID them on site.
Hey, I'm Calvin from the Watershed Project. I do a lot of work with my supervisor Helen to monitor the health of creeks, especially in Contra Costa County, but also in other cities. We do primarily 3 different kinds of studies. We do insect research, so we collect the benthic macroinvertebrates, the large bugs that live on the bottom of the creeks, both in the sediment and on the rocks. We identify those and use those as an indicator of creek health. Basically, you know, if fragile insects can survive in this creek, then this creek must be fairly healthy. I also help with trash assessments, which is pretty much just how much pollution is going into these creeks, which is helpful both for identifying upstream sources, like if there's a homeless encampment, or maybe there's like dumpsters that aren't being closed behind a retail store. And then also we do water quality monitoring with sensors, and that helps pick up pollutants that aren't easy to identify or see with the eye.
So a lot of the things that we'll notice, there's quite a lot of litter in a lot of the creeks that we survey, which, you know, a lot of it's just coming from the streets and, you know, just being blown from all over. And this does really affect the general health of the creeks themselves. The creeks already have quite a few water quality issues. A lot of them don't have enough oxygen, which creates like a lot of algae growth, and there's a lot of like silt and sediment, which makes it difficult for fish and other aquatic species to breathe. It can suffocate them. So yeah, it's just always important to be aware of how you're disposing of your waste, because it will ultimately, you know, we all live in a watershed, so it'll ultimately end up in, you know, aquatic life. And as people are well aware, it does affect also the, you know, other wildlife. The birds that live, you know, near the creek are also affected by that. So it's really important to do citizen science in whichever area that you live. There's a lot of ways to be involved in citizen science, and it's a great group effort, and you can learn a lot from, you know, all the different organizations that do citizen science projects. So that's sort of what we're doing here today.
Overall, it's important to me because I'm studying to be a marine biologist, and I'm a scientific diver. And I've been scuba diving in California since I was 14. And there's a lot of issues that I see that we can't fix at the ocean. You know, they've already happened. And so it's really important to me that sort of the marine community and the sort of freshwater community foster like a partnership to fix a lot of these problems, like marine debris. And marine pollution, especially things that people don't think of as pollutants necessarily, like 10 years back when we had the big cat litter thing that was killing off otters. And since then we've had other big kind of issues like that, where it's important for us to have these relationships to get the word out. And I think that, you know, each individual person can make a difference. Personally, I believe the most important way to make a difference is just voting, you know, and just really like putting people into office who understand these issues, and voting for policies that help and grants that help fund these projects. But of course, it's also important to just make sure that your trash doesn't end up in the ocean. A lot of times I see volunteers at a cleanup that'll get kind of discouraged how much trash they see, how little trash they've picked up, and I always like to remind them, you know, how many pieces of trash does it take to kill an otter? Does it take to kill a bird? Sometimes just one. Sometimes just one bottle cap, you know? So even if it's just that one little thing that you pick up or that one little thing that you prevent from getting there that would have been there otherwise, that can be really important. So thank you for all your help.
I'm Helen FITANIDES. I work with the Watershed Project. We're a nonprofit based in Richmond in the East Bay. I manage creek monitoring programs in Contra Costa County. So our main program is going out monthly to about 30 different sites throughout the county on 6 different creeks and looking at water quality parameters, so temperature, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, pH, things like that. And you know, if you do that for long enough, you can get a pretty good idea of how healthy the creek is. What we're doing today is actually kind of the broad overview. Instead of looking at individual parameters every month, we're going in once a year in the spring and looking at benthic macroinvertebrates to try to indicate how healthy the creek is in general. So benthic macroinvertebrates are invertebrates. They're macro, you can see them with your naked eye, although sometimes barely, they're pretty small. And they're invertebrates, and they live at the bottom of the creek. So they're a really important part of the fish food chain. Fish eat them. They eat a lot of detritus that ends up in the creek, either algae or leaves from trees or woody debris or anything that ends up in the creek. And they actually, each group of bugs has a different tolerance level to pollution. So by looking and seeing what kind of bugs we have living in the creek, we can actually determine how healthy the creek is. So it's like the broad scale overview. We don't know why the creek is healthy necessarily, but we know that it must be pretty healthy if we see mayflies and stoneflies and caddisflies. Those are like the trifecta of a healthy creek. And the healthy creeks tend to have cooler temperatures, they tend to be shady, they tend to have a lot of diversity in the stream, so some rocks, some woody debris, shade cover, and they tend to be, as I said, on the cooler side of things, and they tend to not have pollution. So earlier this morning, that's what we were doing. We were in the creek looking for benthic macroinvertebrates, and we actually send them off to a lab who's going to pick through everything and identify them down to family, genus, species. They send those back to me in a table, and then we can actually go through and create a health score for the creek. One of the things that I think is only recently becoming a pollution issue in creeks, or becoming more well known as a pollution issue, is trash. And so this afternoon we're doing a trash assessment on just a downstream section of the same creek, which is Grayson Creek in Pleasant Hill. So for this one, we actually come back to the same site every year and we tally everything we find. So everything from cigarette butts to plastic bags to disposable utensils to tires sometimes to furniture and appliances to styrofoam. We identify everything, and so we can look year to year and actually see trends. So when the plastic bag ban happened in Contra Costa County, or in, I think, several cities employed or took the ban, we can look back and see whether there was actually a decrease in plastic bags that end up in the creek. So Trash ends up in the creek from a few different sources. It can be dumped here sometimes. We see construction material or things like that, especially tires, things that you have to pay to dispose of tend to end up in the creek instead. It could just blow out of your trash can, it could blow out of the landfill, it could blow out of a garbage truck that's taking your trash from your can to the landfill. And everything is connected. Water rolls downhill and everything is going to end up in the creek. The drains that collect our stormwater do not have filters on them. That just goes straight to the creek and that just goes straight to the bay. So a lot of stuff ends up in creeks that you wouldn't think. The more we see plastic in creeks, the more we have to wonder where it's coming from and where it's going. A lot of things are recyclable, glass and metal. Plastics, some plastics are, but it's actually an increasing issue that it's hard to recycle, that it doesn't recycle fully. And really, the more we see what's happening in the environment, the more we really want to stay away from plastic as much as we can, especially film plastics. You know, if you're just like putting saran wrap around something, maybe you could put it in a glass container instead. Plastics really don't break down. They'll break into smaller pieces, which then become, you know, it looks like food. So a lot of birds end up with a lot of plastic in their stomach because it looks like food, and because when plastic sits around, it just breaks into smaller and smaller pieces. Same with styrofoam. So a lot of takeout containers, plastic or styrofoam will just sit in the creek and break down and turn into food, and birds die that way. If it ends up in the creek, fish will probably eat it too. So one thing that we can do to kind of impact creek health and water quality is to stay away from plastics as much as we can and try to use reusable things whenever possible.
Sure.
Thank you for taking care of the creek and for keeping Grayson Creek healthy. Everything that lives in the creek, from the bugs to the fish to the birds, thanks you.